The latest controversy surrounding Bain concerns how Romney helped found the company with investments from Central American elites linked to death squads in El Salvador. After initially struggling to find investors, Romney traveled to Miami in 1983 to win pledges of $9 million, 40% of Bain's startup money. Some investors had extensive ties to the death squads responsible for the vast majority of the tens of thousands of deaths in El Salvador during the 80s. The investors include the Salavado family, whose former U.S. ambassador to El Salvador, Robert White, has previously accused of directly funding the Salvadoran paramilitaries. In his memoir, former Bain executive Harry Strawn writes, Romney pushed aside his own misgivings about the investors to accept their backing. Strawn writes, quote, these Latin American friends have loyally rolled over investments in succeeding funds, actively participated in Bain's Capital's May investor meetings, and are still today one of the largest investor groups in Bain Capital. Well, for more, we're joined by Ryan Grimm in Washington, D.C., bureau chief for the Huffington Post. He's connecting the dots in the latest story headlined, Mitt Romney started Bain Capital with money from families tied to death squads. Ryan, welcome to Democracy Now! If you could carefully lay out the story and set the stage in El Salvador in the early 80s, what was happening there, the carnage?
Sure. So in 1980, there was land reform instituted by the El Salvadoran government that started to parcel up some of the farms, some of the coffee plantations, and the other land holdings of the elite, and they also nationalized the international coffee trade. So they didn't nationalize the industry, but just the foreign export of it. And so the oligarchs responded with a vicious and a brutal campaign that included death squads, and in the first year or two killed something like 35,000 people, and over the course of a decade killed about 70,000 people. The UN has since calculated that about 85% of the killing was done by these right-wing death squads. So this is not one of those dirty wars where both sides were equally culpable. And the leader of this movement, Roberto D'Aubuisson, was very public about his support of death squads, and that death squads were an important part of what they were doing. He would actually say that the purpose of the death squads was ultimately to diminish violence, because if you could go into a village and go into a couple houses and kill everyone in there, then it would send a message to the rest of the village that they shouldn't join the revolution, and therefore there would be less of an uprising, and then the death squads would not have to kill everyone. So that was the kind of macabre logic that lasted for slightly more than a decade in El Salvador.
One